Ayan. Good morning ulit sa inyong lahat. Nandito ulit ako para i-discuss yung ating last topic from this first term, the psychological self or understanding the self in psychological perspective. So let's start our discussion. Let's define psychology. So when we say psychology, it is the study of behavior and mental processes. So hindi siya pagbabasa ng isipan, but it's about or based from the behavior or anything an organism does, any action that we can observe and record. So, mental process are the internal subjective experiences we infer from behavior, sensation, perception, dreams, thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. So, by the way, before ako magpatuloy, remind ko lang kayo na you also read the module 1 that I have given you. I already uploaded it on our classroom. Anyway, let's go now to the 4 goals of psychology. Number 1, the goal of psychology is to describe, di ba? Describe, for example, the behavior na nakita niya na nakakaiba. Number 2 is to understand and explain, di ba? Ano ba yung behavior niya na yon, di ba? At kung kailan yun nag-occur. And number 3, to control, di ba? To control the unnecessary behavior. And number 4, to predict, o kaya in psychologist term, to diagnose, di ba? Ano bang klase or ano bang uri yun? It is normal ba? Or it is not that normal, di ba? So let's go now to the psychoanalytic theory of Sigmund Freud. So, what is psychoanalytic theory? Psychoanalytic theory is mostly established by the ego of by the age of 5 develops during childhood. So, psychoanalytic theory, it is the well-known theory of Freud and is also one of the most controversial theories because what? Kasi nga, it was based from the age of 5 wherein hindi naman lahat ng tao ay may natatandaan pa during the age of 5, di ba? Or the early experiences. Sabi din ni Freud na yung mga early experiences daw natin na yon play a large role in our personality development even until today. And like yung sinabi ko dun sa may previous discussion natin, na yung behavior natin ngayon ay malaki yung impact kung sino yung mga taong nakasalamuhan natin when we are still children, di ba? When we're still in children. However, it's just a theory of Freud because not everyone believe in that. Kasi hindi naman lahat ay may natataanan pa, like what I had said nga kanina. So, what is libido? For Freud, libido is the psychosexual energy that acts as the driving force behind any behavior. So, for example, behavior and personality derives from the constant and unique interaction of conflicting psychological forces that operate at 3 different levels of awareness, the preconscious, the conscious, and the. So, according to Freud, there are 3 levels of the mind. The conscious mind includes everything that you are aware of, and the preconscious mind, it is the part of the mind that represents ordinary memory while we are not consciously aware of this information at any given time. But for example, may nakita ka na bagay or tao na nakapagpaalala sa'yo nung situation na yon, it can retrieve and pull it into conscious when needed. How about the unconscious mind? It is the feelings, the thoughts, the urges, and memory outside our conscious awareness. So, according to Freud, most of the contents ng ating unconscious mind ay yung mga unacceptable or unpleasant such feelings of pain, anxiety, or conflict. So, for example, nasaktan ka, sabi ni Freud, you choose to put it na lang into unconscious mind na kaya nga sinasabi natin, 'di ba? Kalimutan ko na lang 'yan, 'di ba? So, 'yon. And iceberg theory. So, sabi ni 'yon, this is the structures of personality. So Freud saw the self, its mental processes, and one's behavior as the result of the interaction between the id, the ego, and the superego. So I already discussed it naman na, but papahapyawan na lang natin. What is id? It is component of personality that is present from birth, di ba? According to Freud, it is entirely unconscious, and this is driven by the pleasure principle, which strives for immediate gratification of all desires, wants, and needs. And the second one is the superego, the last component of personality, sorry. The last component of personality. Ah, So, aspect of personality that holds our internalized moral standards and the sense of right and wrong. It is our guidelines in making judgment and acts to perfect and civilize our behavior. So, let's go now to ego, the component of personality that is responsible for dealing in reality, or what we call the reality principle. According to Freud, the key to healthy personality is the balance between id, ego, and superego. So, these are defense mechanisms. According to Freud, these defense mechanisms are made because a person wants to provoke, 'di ba, the anxiety na nararamdaman niya, 'di ba? And defense mechanism is also a coping strategy or a defense, 'di ba? Although we may knowingly use these mechanisms, in many cases, this defense work unconsciously to distort reality. For example, lagi mo na lang ginagamit yung defense mechanism na yan. Example is denial. Lagi ka na lang nagde-deny, di ba? So, denying or denial is denying the anxiety outright. Diba? No, it's not me, diba? Refusal to accept the reality or the fact, acting as if painful event, thought, or feeling did not exist anymore. So, sabi ni Freud, kung lagi daw tayong nagde-deny, 'di ba? Maaaring yung reality na alam natin talaga ay ma-distort, 'di ba? On the back of our mind. How about repression? Repression kasi is blacking out or preventing of anxiety back into unconscious, na kalimutan mo na lang siya. For example, repression causes a person to forget an event, 'di ba? Example, a child whose parent was killed in a car crash may grow up with no memory of that event because they have simply pushed this into the unconscious and aren't aware of it all. Kasi nga, ano siya hindi siya good memory. So, she chose to repress na lang. So, rationalization, it's about creating false reasons or explanations for anxiety in the form of shortcoming. So, for example, nagkamali ka, di ba? Kasi hindi ko naman alam di ba? Nagra-rationalize or nagre-reason ka agad, di ba? So, it's a form of defense mechanism. Kapag alam mo na papagalitan ka na, you are thinking at the back of your mind na mag-reason out ka, diba? So, how about the projection? Projection is seeing others' unacceptable feelings that reside in one's own unconscious. For example, kasi naman yung tong tao na to napaka-inggitera, 'di ba? Pero hindi mo alam yung sinasabi, ikaw pala yung naiinggit, 'di ba? Ikaw pala yung nakakaramdam ng envy or ng jealousy. So, pino-project mo yung nararamdaman mo in other people, 'di ba? Para mabawasan yung anxiety or yung stress na nararamdaman mo. So, yun. How about the displacement? Ito yung ina-acting out mo yung anxiety on an innocent party. For example, pinagalitan ka ni teacher, 'di ba? So pag uwi mo ng bahay, ang pinagalitan mo yung kapatid mo kasi hindi ka naman pwedeng mag-reason out or magalit din, 'di ba, kay teacher. So ang ginawa mo, display mo 'yon towards other people, 'di ba? Or kaya naman galit ka galit ka sa isang tao pero hindi mo maipakita na galit ka sa kanya. So anong gagawin mo? Magbabasag ka ng something, 'di ba? Magbabasag ka for example ng plato or anything na mahawakan mo, binabasag mo or binabagsak mo. So it's what we call displacement. How about the reaction formation? Ito yung reversing the nature of anxiety so that it feels like the opposite nature. So for example, ng reaction formation, meron kang bagong friend during college. Syempre, kunyari, nabasag niya yung tumbler mo, di ba? So, ikaw, bilang bago niyang friend, hindi ka naman pwedeng magalit. So, kahit galit ka na, ang sasabihin mo, hindi, okay lang, hindi ako galit. Pero deep inside, ay galit ka or naiinis ka. So, yung reaction mo ay finorm mo or ni-reverse mo into a more positive way. So, the next one is sublimation. Sublimation is channeling anxiety into socially acceptable activities. So, for example, you are angry kasi hindi ka napili or hindi ikaw yung na-promote, di ba? So, ang ginawa mo, you work harder than before and started your own venture, di ba? So, sublimation is channeling negative urges or events in your life into impulses that is positive or socially acceptable behavior. How about the regression? Regression is to a more infantile psychosexual stages when the psychic energy remains fixated. For example, kapag kinakabahan ka, nag-aano ka, tamsaking ka, or kaya kinakagat mo yung mga fingers mo, di ba? Yung mga So, due to the pressure, example, si Tom, di ba? Sleeping to an earlier stage of development when faced with stress, di ba? Pa na-stress siya, ang ginagawa niya, nagtatamsaking siya. Kasi nga, gusto niya na mag-regress or bumalik muna sa pagkabata or yung mga what do you call that? Yung uh, mga ginagawa niya during during early stages niya ay nailalabas niya during the stress or the anxiety na nafe-feel niya. And that's our defense mechanism according to Freud. Let's go now to the self-concept and self-esteem. So ano ba yung self-concept? It is similar to self, identity, and self-concept. So pag sinabing self-concept, ito yung identity or composed of personal characteristic, 'di ba? Social roles mo and responsibilities mo as well as the affiliation that define who one is. How about the self-concept? Basically, it is from your mind when you are asked about who you are, 'di ba? Sino ka ba? 'Di ba? Or ano ka ba? Ano bang it is about it is based on your subjective opinion about yourself. So, according to Carl Rogers, captured this idea in his concept of self-schema or our organized system or collection of knowledge about who we are. So, sino ba si Carl Rogers? So, siya yung gumawa ng person-centered theory. And his basic assumptions is number one, formative tendency. Tendency for all matter, both organic and inorganic, to evolve from simpler to more complex forms. So, sinasabi dito na change is inevitable from small to big, 'di ba? Tendency for things to move from disorganization to organization. And what do you think if your genetic potential, 'di ba? Actualizing tendency with all humans and even animals or plants to move toward the fulfillment of potentials, tendency toward self-actualization. So, similarity to Maslow's approach, because each person operates as one complete organism, actualization involves whole person, physiological and intellectual, rational and emotional, conscious and unconscious. For example, the need to satisfy one's hunger drive. Diba? Siyempre lang namang hindi ka kumain. Diba? So, kapag gutom ka, gahanap ka ng pagkain. How about naman kapag inaantok ka? So, gagawin mo, matutulog ka, 'di ba? So, How about the tendency to maintain and enhance? Pag sinabing to maintain includes the basic needs, 'di ba? The food, the air, 'di ba? The safety, but it also includes the tendency to resist change and to seek the status quo or the balanced life. People desire to protect their current comfortable self-concept, and people fight against new ideas. They distort experiences that do not quite fit. They find change painful and growth frightening. So, takot sila into change, di ba? They are just, ano ba? They are just uh, wanting lang yung pagme-maintain kung anong meron sila or nagsusustain sa kanila. How about the enhancement? So, these people are more to develop and achieve growth, diba? Personal man ito or career. So, the uh, must be willing to learn things that are not immediately rewarding. For example, you want to become a lawyer, so you must study harder, diba? And people are willing to face threat and pain because of biologically tendency for the organisms to fulfill its basic nature. So Carl Rogers' self-concept. Two self-subsystems. Self-concepts includes all those aspects of one's being and one's experiences that are perceived in awareness by the individual. Example, the subjective self, yun nga, yung pinaliwanag ko kanina. Yung pagtingin mo sa sarili mo, 'di ba? The self-concept is not identical with the organismic, and the organismic self is the real self. So they are not always identical. What one is or one's entire being. Number two is the ideal self. Syempre, ito yung view mo sa sarili mo as you want to view yourself, 'di ba? Parang ito yung dream mo na maging ikaw, 'di ba? It contains all those attributes, usually positive, that people aspire to possess, 'di ba? Congruence happens when we feel good about ourselves, 'di ba? So congruence is somewhat healthy, 'di ba? There is a small gap between ourself and real self and ideal self. This gives us confidence, 'di ba? Satisfaction, 'di ba? And even the sense of self-actualization or fulfillment, leading to a high self-esteem. How about the incongruence? Incongruence happen when you are disappointed or frustrated kung nasaan ka na ngayon, 'di ba? If you're uh, kung nasan ka ngayon ay misaligned dun sa pinaplano mo talaga for yourself. Kaya nga sabi ko sa mga students ko before, dapat si self-concept mo at si ideal self, hindi sila ganun kalayo sa isa't isa. Kasi kapag hindi mo na-achieve yung ideal self mo, there are times that you will feel, alam mo yun, yung burnout ka na or disappointed ka na on your own self. So, dapat kapag may goal ka, make sure na hindi naman ito nalalayo, 'di ba? Or hindi ito super imposible, or kaya naman ihanda mo yung sarili mo sa kalalabasan, 'di ba? So, experiencing incongruence may happen from time to time. Yes, this is true, most especially in cases or contexts that are new or extreme. So, class, it's okay to feel disappointed or stressed sometimes, 'di ba? But remember na hindi mo kailangan ma-stuck dun sa concept na disappointed ako sa sarili ko kasi failure ako. So, never. There are circumstances like this, we need to reflect, di ba? We need to evaluate our behavior. Ano ba yung mali kong nagawa? Ano ba yung tama kong nagawa? And be reminded of our ideal self to put us back on track, di ba? So, we have to put ourselves together, di ba? And we have to learn to separate behaviors from the totality of one's being. We may have behaved badly, but it doesn't mean that we automatically or entirely a bad person, diba? So, remember na kapag nakagawa ka ng hindi maganda, it's not about you na masama, diba? Yun yung ginawa mo, hindi ikaw. So, don't or never generalize your self-concept just because you have done something wrong in the past. So, below is a figure. What do you see, class? Yan. So, sadly, a single unintentional mistake is used to judge a person holistically. So, we might have been a victim of this, or we might also be a guilty of doing this to other people. After all, we are here to understand the self, not to judge or condemn it, diba? So, for example, natutunan mo na to ngayon, you may apply it in your personal life or in relation to other people. 'Di ba? Hindi naman masama magkamali minsan-minsan, 'di ba? Ang mahalaga doon, you are not staying doon sa pagkakamali na 'yon, 'di ba? So becoming a person or becoming an individual must make contact, 'di ba? You have to have a positive regard, need to be loved, like or accepted by another person, and a prerequisite for positive self-regard. So, positive regard kasi is from other people, di ba? Ano yung mga, how about the positive self-regard? It's from yourself, di ba? So, Rogers believed that receiving positive regard from others is necessary for positive self-regard. But, okay class, once positive regard is established, it becomes independent of the continual need to be loved. So, once na na-establish na yan, hindi mo na kailangan ng opinion ng ibang tao para lang matanggap mo yung sarili mo. Diba? Kaya maganda, on my own opinion, maganda na ma-establish mo na yung positive self-regard before yung positive regard. Diba? So, positive regard, ito kasi yung warm affection or love, respect na natatanggap natin sa ibang tao. And the unconditional positive regard, ito yung walang kapalit na pinaparamdam sa'yo or binibigay sa'yo ng ibang tao. Pero yung conditional positive regard, for example, kailangan mo muna ma-achieve to bago kanya tanggapin, di ba, or mahalin. So, yun yung conditional positive regard. Example, conditional positive regard, sabi ng tatay niya, just remember son, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose unless you want daddy's love, di ba? So, unconditional positive regard, I love you no matter what, di ba? So, it's about giving love or affection to other people without any reservation or without restriction na walang hinihinging kapalit. So according to Rogers, curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change, diba? Only when you accept yourself, only when you choose to love yourself, you will find peace and understanding rin sa sarili mo. So, what is self-esteem? Self-esteem is a group identity and self-awareness. So, it is the confidence that you have the positive or negative perception about yourself or evaluation of ourselves, diba? So, we have here the two social comparison, the downward social comparison and the upward social comparison, wherein downward social comparison is comparing ourselves with others that is worse off or lower than us. How about the upward social comparison? It is comparing ourselves with those who are better off than us. So, ang self-esteem ng isang tao might be came or coming from the downward social comparison or the upward social comparison, di ba? So, self-evaluation maintenance theory, which states that a person is what do you call that? Is or can feel threatened when someone outperforms than her or than him, 'di ba? Pagka for example, mas magaling siya sa akin, 'di ba? So, in attempt to increase the maintenance of self-esteem, some people become narcissistic. It is the trait or the character by a people with a high self-esteem, self-admiration, and self-centeredness, di ba? For example, may usapan kayo, di ba? Kayo, group of friends, may usapan kayo, gusto niya, siya yung laging bumabangka or siya yung naitataas. So, narcissistic personality disorder comes from the Greek word narcissus, who fell in love with the reflection of himself in a pool and unable to live it and died as a result. So, anyway, class, disclaimer lang, we are here not to judge or not to diagnose a person, but to define lang what is narcissistic, diba? It is the people who think they are better than everyone else and should get rid their way in all circumstances, and who will walk all over others to accomplish their goals, diba? And many more, diba? And you cannot say that he is narcissistic just because she did or he did something, diba? Na naitaas yung sarili niya. So, we cannot diagnose it as narcissistic because there are underlying circumstances and diagnosis pa up to here. So, worth knowing. Self-esteem natin is very important, and studies have shown that in only correlation, not casual, causality to positive outputs and outlook. Kapag kasi positive yung tingin mo sa sarili mo, even your work will be positive. Whether we feel it or not, we have to understand and accept that we are capable to help ourselves and attain the ideal self that we intended to become. And we have the ability to improve ourselves, diba? No matter what happened in the past, no matter what is happening now, we can do something, no matter how little, to contribute to the future we hope to have. So, kung napapansin mo or nakikita mo or sinasabi ng ibang tao na hanggang dyan ka na lang, so it's not true. Kasi at the end of the day, uh, based on you pa rin, diba? Nasa sayo pa rin yun. And have you been investigating in your life lately, diba? So, investigate mo yung life mo. There are season ba in your life nang pinapakinggan mo na lang ay yung mga sinasabi ng ibang tao sa'yo, diba? Why not kilalanin mo naman yung sarili mo, diba? Ina-aspect na matatanggap mo, diba? So, accepting yourself is also accepting your failure. But accepting yourself, hindi ibig sabihin nun na ay, na-fail na kasi ako, so gawin ko na lang to, pagpatuloy ko na lang to. So, it's not about that. It's about improving yourself, diba? So, I hope na marami kayong natutunan dito sa ating Module 1, sa ating 5 topic. And that ends our discussion. Thank you so much. God bless everyone.